Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Terumais Pedig Dalit Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Lamed Vav. Let's quickly just review the Shiyurim that according to the Tanakama / Chachamim, really we can say / Beis Hillel, even though the Mishnah did not mention Hillel, but the fact that we mentioned Beis Shammai on the other side, that means that on this side, let's call it Shitas Beis Hillel. And that's the shiurim that we are familiar with, that even though that's the premise of what we are learning, that mida oiraisa, chita achas poiteres es kol akri, more about this will be at the end of today's shir, regarding the biblical minimum. What's the meaning of chita achas? There's actually going to be three ways of understanding this liner, chita achas poiteres es kol akri. But biblically, let's go with what we have been saying until now. Any amount suffices to rectify the pile from tevel. Midrabanan, there has to be a minimum amount. What is that minimum amount? Really, they gave three shiyurim. Beis Hillel, the stingy, which means the ayin ra. If you want to give the minimum of the minimum, you have to give at least 1 from 60. The beinin is the average, should give 1 from 50. And ayin toiva, someone who wants to be generous, should give 1 from 40. Truth be told, we already mentioned it in the Mishnah, and we're going to begin today's share again with more details, that if someone wants to be really, really generous, they can give even more than 1 of 40, but you have to always be mindful that being generous to the Kohen also automatically means being stingy with the Levi, like everything else in life, because the Truma itself doesn't have to have Ma'aser Rishon removed from it. So therefore, it's correct to say that if you want to be generous, but not hurt the Levi, the shear was 1 of 40. Now, what is Shitas Beis Shammai? So in the Mishnah, explicitly, the Mishnah only said that Beis Shammai holds that the generous should be even more 1 of 30. But from a Tosefta, and as the Gemara said also, Beis Shammai, everything goes down one step. So since the generous is 130, the Beininus is 140, and the Ayin Ra, the stingy, is 1 of 50. That is what we had until now. What we're going to open up today's daf will be focusing on the words of the Mishnah that says that Toram va'ola b'yodi echad mishishim, if when you separated Truma, you gave the minimum amount, even though it's a person that normally gives echad michamishim, but he gave at least in his separation, he gave the minimum echad mishishim l'chayris l'shitas Beis Hillel l'choira. We'll see in a moment the chiddush of Gemara soon. So first of all, Truma. That's what the Mishnah writes. And when we learned the Mishnah yesterday, we add, what's the chiddush here? So we're actually going to have a deeper, more nuanced understanding of this one line of the Mishnah. Truma ve'ein tzarech litroim. And what will become clear through this discussion is that even though it's correct what we said when we quoted the Tosefta, we read the Tosefta and the Rasharilio yesterday. Like Beis Shammai, the ayin ra, the stingy, should give 150, 1 of 50. But even Beis Shammai, as long as you gave 1 of 60, you're good. So really it's going to have that the lower amount, Beis Shammai is telling you want to be stingy? Okay, enjoy 1 of 50. But if you even give less than that, up until at least 1 of 60, you were yoitza. Versus, as the Mishnah writes itself, midrabanan, the Mishnah writes, that if a person made a separation, and what came out of his hand, mishishim ve'echad, what you gave was only 1 of 61, or less. Here, even Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, only from the under 60, do we say truma, but v'yachzer v'yitroim k'moishu hu lamud b'midah, and today we will also focus on this liner in the Mishnah, and to word it the way I would like to word it, there's going to be a machlokes amoraim where to put a comma. Whether you read it truma v'yachzer v'yitroim comma k'moishu hu lamud b'mida b'mishkal u'b'minyan, or do you put a comma after the word shehu lamud? In other words, when you have to make another separation because you didn't even hit the 1 of 60. There's going to be a machlokes amoraim whether you have to separate from that hashlama meiser. And I know that Vlad mentioned on this yesterday. What do I mean by that? When a person separated and he got the minimum echad mishishim, and the Mishnah writes explicitly, you don't have to separate more, even if you normally give more generous, but you gave the minimum. And then the Mishnah writes, and if you gave more, chazar v'hoisiv, the Mishnah says the words yechayiv b'maisros. Those words mean that what you did is nothing. It's not even truma. Put it back in the pile. Why is it not even truma? I'll tell you why. Because once you were misak and tevel, we keep on saying it, only tevel can become truma. Once you gave one of 60, even midrabanan, it's mesukan from truma, right? So how can you? If you added, it's nonsense. You did nothing. Now, when the Mishnah writes that if you made a separation and you didn't even hit the one of 60, you hit one of 61 or less, the Mishnah says you have to be mashlim. You have to add. That addition will be truma. But according to some Amoraim, still, even though it's truma, you still have to give from it ma'aser Farvas, because since midoi raisa chita achas piteres eskol akri, that means really on a biblical level, everything was mesukan. Which means that on a biblical level, from everything left, you have to give ma'aser. You cannot circumvent that. The Rabbanan are only going to be machmer. They're not going to be mekel. We only go in one direction. We add, we don't subtract. Okay, and we'll leave it at that. That's today's daf. So let's have a daf lamed vav. It's real beautiful. Pop it up, mamash all the way on top. In the brackets, we're quoting the case in the Mishnah where Taram va'ola biyodei echad mishishim. Right? Again, the way we read the Mishnah. The problem with the Mishnah is the Mishnah says that if you made a truma and you came and what came out was one of 60, so the Mishnah words is truma ve'einoy tzarech litroim pshita. So the way we addressed the pshita yesterday was no, this guy always gives one of chamishin. So you would think that he can say no, I wanted to give more. I made a mistake in my approximation. Too late. Now, by the way, it's very different than in the beginning of this Pedic. In the beginning of the Pedic, when we spoke about a person who was mafresh mixas, that's why we have to keep on repeating it. When I separate truma, and I know or I have in mind that I'm not going to do it in one go, there is where we say that just because I removed one saw, but if there's 100 and I have to remove a second, I have to remove a second. They'll talk about. Our Mishnah is speaking about someone who has a much smaller amount in front of him. You are able in one separation to remove the required amount, whatever your amount is. You're doing things by approximation, and you made a wrong approximation. So the Mishnah is saying that as long as you gave the minimum, it's good. And ve'ein tzarech litrei. Okay. But still, it's pshita. So the Gemara says that loy tzarcha de law. You have to get used to the way people express themselves. This ruling is not needed only for kamod de tanan amrin, kamod de nan amrin. Just like we're going to say that Toram va'ola biyodei echad mishishim truma ve'eina tzarech litraim. Just like that's clear. In other words, the premise, the Gemara is trying to tell you that this statement is l'shitas Beis Hillel, because Beis Hillel is the one that says that the minimum, the ayin ra'ah, should give one of shishim. According to Beis Shammai, what's the minimum? One of chamishim. So the premise is that this statement is not leBeis Shammai, which is perfect. Hey, in Beis Shammai yoimrim, taram va'ola b'yodei echad mechamishim, only then is it truma ve'ein tzarech litroim. And what the Gemara is trying to tell you is what the Mishnah is being machadish by implication, that you are only good if you gave at least a minimum, implying that leBeis Shammai, if what you gave was one of 51, that means one, then a little bit less than the minimum leBeis Shammai, then we won't say that the ve'ein tzarech litroim. Yes, tzarech litroim. And that's why the Mishnah said it. And then when the statement is not needed for itself, it's needed for what it implies. It implies the opposite, and the opposite not only leBeis Hillel, the opposite also for Beis Shammai. That's the havamin of the Gemara. And this is going to be corrected. And what we just said now is not correct. And that's going to be a big chiddush. LeBeis Hillel, Aviv, if you give less than 1 of 60, you're not good. Lebeis Shammai, even though we have from the Gemara, we have from the Tosefta, right? That Lebeis Shammai, the minimum, the stingy is 1 of 50. The Beis Shammai tolerates all the way down to 1 of 60. What's Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel meet in the minimum. Let me even word it this way. Lebeis Hillel, there's one level of stingy. Lebeis Shammai, they're stingy and they're super stingy that we still tolerate. Let's read it inside. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Isi. That loy tone bar kapara elo. No. You're wrong. Actually, we found a brisa that is discussing shitas Beis Shammai. That Torah va'ola biyodei mechamishim va'achishim. Then we say truma ve'ein tzarich litroim. Now, when a brisa is speaking about someone who was toidim va'ola biyodei between 50 and 60, who do you think authored this brisa? It cannot be that this brisa was authored by Beis Hillel. Pshita. No, it's Beis Hillel says it's from 40 to 60. The neat 40 being the generous and the stingy and the bene, whatever. So in other words, what's this from 50 to 60? It has to be Beis Shammai. There's a big chiddush here. Because again, you would think that just like Beis Hillel, there's 3 shiurim. The lowest is 1 of 60. If you give less than that, you got to add, you got to complement that. So you would think Beis Shammai brings everything up by a little bit. Right? It's 130, 140, 150. Okay, so Beis Shammai, less than 150, you're not good. No. Even Beis Shammai says, you want to be stingy, say that, give 1 of 50. But I will accept until 60. To say that, in other words, it's, you look at your tefillin, you have 3 and you have 4 shins. It's 3, that's 4. It's 3 shiyurim, but really it's 4 shiyurim. The stingy is mechamishim v'achishim, and that's really what the Mishnah is alluding to. So when the Mishnah says Taram va'ala biyodei echad mishishim, you know why the Mishnah is saying it? The Mishnah is saying it that bein lebeis Hillel or bein lebeis Shammai. That's the chiddush. Even according to Beis Shammai, as long as you gave echad mishishim, you still don't have to give truma again. Truma ve'ein tzarich litroim. Beautiful. Next step. On this case, the Mishnah continues. First of all, you don't have to give truma. And what happens if you do give truma? So the Mishnah writes that chazar v'hoisif, if you added, you said, no, I always give 1 of 50. So the din is chayiv b'maisros. Now, the taich here, chayiv b'maisros, means that the truma is not truma. And non-kohen can eat it. Because once you gave the minimum amount, l'kula alma now, the minimum is 1 of 60, even rabbinically, everything is fixed from tevel of truma. There is no chi of truma. Everything is pater min truma, even with the rabbanan. So it doesn't help for you to say, I'm adding to the truma. Don't forget, lachatchila, I can add a lot. That's the key. Lachatchila, I can add a lot. If I want to give a much bigger percent, I could. If I want to, from the outset. That's not the case here. Here, the guy was approximating. He wanted to give his 1 of 50. He made one. He only planned to make 1 hafrasha. He made 1 hafrasha. You gave 1 of 60. You're good. You end it. You can't now decide, you know what? I want to give more. It's too late. Spotted already. Now, that's what the Gemara is saying. Rabbi Isibish says, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that when do we say that if you add to the 1 of 60, what you added is nothing? That's only because b'mischaven liftoy eskiriyoi. That's because when you made the 1 removal, your kavanah was, I'm making 1 removal. And I'm aiming to give what I normally give. Let's speak about a guy that normally gives 1 of 50. There's still a little bit of a chiddush. No, he gave a little bit less. Doesn't matter. But because he only was planning to make 1 separation. I know that the Gemara words this in the negative, but according to almost all of the commentators here, it's really in the positive. You have to have positive kavanah. You have to, if when you separate truma, you lechatchila have in mind, befedish, I am going to be giving the kohen a very big gift. Not only the 1 of 40, I'm going to be giving him a big gift. Now, Let me ask you, how much can you give? What's the upper limit? Remember, the more you give, the less the Levi will have. Even on a biblical level. No. 1 of 30 Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is speaking to the people. You want to be generous and you want to be mindful not to take away from the Levi. Give 1 of 30. A person has the right to go beyond that. Is there an upper limit? So let me say like this. To give everything to the coin, you can't. Just like we learned by Peah. You have to leave. There has to be something that you leave. Truma means, separation means, I'm giving I'm separating for. Giving it all away doesn't work. Okay, can you give 99% away? Our Rabbi Yochanan follows the Tana Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana Rabbi Yishmael we're going to have on Daf Lamed Zayin, we're going to have tomorrow, that says the max that you can give is called Afilu Achas Alachas. Achas Alachas means up until 50%. One of two. Not 1 of 30, 1 of 2. By the way, according to Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yochanan, who paskins like him, you cannot give more than that. And we'll see that not everyone agrees with that. Others hold you can give even more than that. But we're quoting here, B'Shem, Rabbi Yochanan. So this is Gavaldik. Now we're getting the real picture. In other words, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Iran, they're telling me what I should do. But not everything that I am told that I should do, I have to do. There's a lot of gray area. Much more than people think. People just don't know where the gray area is. There's a lot of room to maneuver. They're telling me, give, but you have to keep for yourself also. You have to give to the Levi also. Give 130. We're going to go with, give 1 of 40. But if I choose to say, no, I am going to give the coin, Mesiras Nefesh, Achas Alachas. Okay. Yes.
So you're left to give Levi
only 10% from the 50%. That's the word. And then you remove the Ma'aser Sheni. And then you have whatever you have.
40 left.
Don't say Gornish, you have 40.
0.5 left.
From the perspective of the coin, you don't have Gornish, you have a lot. From the perspective of the Balabas, I know. Yeah. Okay, Gavaldik. Now we are moving on to the next part. So now we mamish clarified the Mishnah. So in the Reisha, where you gave at least Echad Mishishim, guys, remember this. When you gave Echad Mishishim, and the Mishnah writes Truma ve'enot tzarach litraim, and the Mishnah writes the words Chazar v'hoisev chayev b'maisres. There it means you're chayev b'maisres because it is not Truma. Since you didn't have kavana to give achas alachas, you didn't have that. You had kavana to make 1 afrasha the way Chachamim want. So there, if you gave the minimum, it's finished. But if when you gave the 1 afrasha, you were so off in your estimation that you gave, I'm reading now the next case, which is on what the Gemara is going on, that if all of the yadai, the words are mishishim ve'echad, you get it simple. If what you gave now was only 1 of 61 or less, means it's less than the 1 of 60. So first of all, the Mishnah writes, I'm reading the words of the Mishnah, Truma, what you gave is done. We don't say, since you were off, start from the beginning. That we don't say. What you did was effective. Truma. Makes sense. Why is it effective? Because Midai Raisa, any amount is enough. Can't undo what you did. Eloma, you did not even hit the minimum share. So what do you have to do is, V'yachser v'yitroim. If the Mishnah would have said that, it would have been Gavaldik. But here are the words of the Mishnah. V'yachser v'yitroim. K'mois shehu lamud. You have to know how to interpret it. I'm going to tell you that there are 2 different ways of interpreting it. B'mida, b'mishkal, b'minyan. So first of all, what we said yesterday, just to repeat, and then we'll build on it, that even though Truma is not allowed to be given an exact, Truma has to be given by estimation. The second, I'm going to call compensatory hashlama. When I'm being mashlim, you could actually make it exact. Because you're dealing with a person that just saw that he's off. I don't know how to approximate. I didn't have my coffee today. Something is off. I don't want to give 1 of 30. I want to give what I normally give. Let's say I normally give 1 of 50. Now that they chop, I gave 1 of 61. So now I have to add I have to go from 1, I have to add it until it hits 1 in 50. How do I do that? Here I can even measure. The added can be kamoishu hu lamud. That's one way of reading it. When you give this addition, you can give it by measuring to hit what you normally give. Now we're going to have a machloikis, and by the way, that is truma. That is truma. There's going to be a machloikis amayroim whether you have to separate from this truma maisres. Why would you have to separate from this addition maisres? Because since we're not saying go back to the beginning. See, if we would have said you didn't even hit 60, so do everything again. We're not saying that. The Mishnah is saying what you gave was truma. Elomai v'yachzir v'yitroim. So maybe, since midoraisa it's good, I have to do v'yachzir v'yitroim, but on the other hand, midoraisa it's exempt. That means midoraisa it's chayiv b'maisres. How can I remove that chiyuv? Exactly. Now, but the way we're gonna get to that is to know how do we teach the words kamoishu hulamud. So kahana Omar, let's imagine in Babel Reb Kahana, the Yerushalmis, the Hamish, they were greater people. The greater people don't need titles. So kahana Omar kamoishu hulamud, you are you have to give. You have to give. I'm sorry. He says you have to give exactly what you normally give. You know what that means, Aviv? You're not allowed to give more, you're not allowed to give less. When I'm making a new hashlama, Kahana learns, make sure the added will add up to what you normally give. All because of the problem. The problem is that biblically you're already tithed everything. Elamah, you have to be mashlim. You can't just approximate now. You normally give 1 of 50. Make sure that the second hashlama will hit the 1 of 50. Not more, not less. Rabbi Yechanan says no. Rabbi Yechanan says, now that the Chachamim told you that you have to be mashlim, just like lechatchila when I separate truma, as we just learned, even though Beisilol, Beishamai, Echad Mechem Echad Mishloishim, even though that's the case, if a person wants, again, Rabbi Yechanan paskins like the Tana Rabbi Yishmael that says that there is an upper limit, which is achas alachas. Now that you have to be mashlim, Rabbi Yechanan Omar, afilu achas alachas. Gavaldik. And again, with the chiddush, what's my chiddush? The chiddush is that the more before we come to Maisris, the fact that you can go achas alachas, even though it's a hashlama, is a chiddush in itself. Because normally the rule is, when are you allowed to give the max? To give 1 from 1, if that's your kavanah from the outset. Here, your kavanah was to give your normal 1 of 50. Elama, you made a bad approximation. It's 1 of 61, 1 of 61 or less. So Chazal said, no, and what you did is good. Rabbi Yechanan says, still, now that you have to be mashlim, you can go back to the way the rule is lachatchil. Machlokes number 1. Fragt die Gemara, this is going to be a kasha against the sheet of Rabbi Yechanan v'hataninon. Didn't the Mishnah say the words kamoishu lamud? Kamoishu lamud means the way this person usually is accustomed to giving. How did he read those words? So Rabbi Yechanan will answer, kamoishu lamud means that you cannot give less. Doesn't mean you can't give more. So l'mashal, this guy gives 1 of 50. He's the average guy. If he would have made a mistake with his approximation to 1 of 60, don't add. That's what we learned before. But now that it's 1 of 61, when you add, what's the goal? To give at least 1 of 50. But if you want, you can give the max, which is achas alachas. According to Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rav Kahana, kamoishu lamud would mean to give the way you give, not less nor more.
What happens in a case where the estimation gives 1 in 55?
Perfect. Then you don't have to do anything. The Mishnah said that already. Because the Mishnah says, as long as you gave achas mishishim, truma ve'einu tzarech litre. Aber Amar Rabbi Lazar, I don't have to teach that according to Rabbi Yechanan. you're not understanding where to put the comma on the words kamay shehu lamud. Again, the whole phrase is Allah biyadai mishishim ve'echad truma v'yachzer v'yitraim. So he says, put a comma now. Kamay shehu lamud goes further. Kamay shehu lamud b'mida, which means that now that you are adding, all the Mishnah is telling you is that even though Truma is not allowed to be given b'midah, this hashlama is allowed to be given b'midah, which is gavaldik. Im nischaven lo ha'isef. If you want to add, and by the way, according to Rabbi Yechanan, if you want to add more than your custom, lamud is not going on the person, not going at the way I'm accustomed to. Lamud is from the word midah. If I want to give whatever I want to give, according to Rabbi Yechanan, even up to 1 for 1, you can do that afilu b'midah.
Isn't it the lashon is kefi shehu lamud?
Kemois shehu lamud.
So it does correlate to him.
Correct. Allah b'yadem mishishim ve'echad truma v'yachzer v'yitraim. The way you want to give now, Kamay shehu lamud means not the way you normally give it. Kamay shehu lamud means give it any way you want to give it. Add as much as you want to the max, which is achas al achas, even b'midah b'mishkal b'midah.
Then that will negate the way you used to, because
that will negate the way you normally do it. Very good. That's the way Rabbi Yechanan understands it. So there's two chidushim. Chidush number one is that we had in the Mishnah already, is that even though truma has to be given by approximation, we had psukim for that. Not this truma. Makes so much sense. Why we learned pshat? Why can't you measure truma? Because since midoraisa there is no shear, so we want to remember there's no shear. We did that already. This guy already did the first separation without measuring. He fulfilled that. He knows there's no shir midoraisa. But midarabanan, you have to get at least a 1 of 60. That you have to add. Now that you're adding, you can add as much as you want, kumayshu lamud, and any way you want. Okay. Now the question is, with this added, L'Rav Kahana, you can only add until what you're normally accustomed to. L'Rabbi Yechanan, you can add until achas, and that's truma. But maybe it's truma that still has to have ma'asanishin removed from it. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yoina Amar, that's the machlokes now. That Rab Shimon ben Lakish ba'a kumi Rabbi Yechanan, who shared this was Rabbi Yoina. But this is a conversation between these two brother-in-laws. Asked Reish Lakish to Rabbi Yechanan, Toisefes truma, regarding this additional truma. Mahi, what's the question? Machlokes here. We're going to go with the Marafulda. Mahi, look inside the Marafulda, third line from the top. Kol heicha sheyachzer v'yitroim. However you add l'Rav Kahana leyu, hai toisefes chayeves b'maiser oiloi. So Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan gave him an answer that was very unclear, Pasha, to understand what he's saying. And this is what he said. His words are, Mishum Yachid Ani Shoina Oisa. I know this law based on the Das Yachid, or I know the rule according to the Das Yachid. Who is the Das Yachid? In our Mishnah, there was a Rabbi Yehuda. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said another rule. Rabbi Yehuda says that this Tosefes does not even need to be given min hamukaf. This Tosefes does not even need to be given min hamukaf. What does that have to do with this conversation? We're going to have to chap now. Rabbi Yechanan paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yechanan knew vadai what Rabbi Yehuda holds regarding our question of Tosefes Truma. He didn't answer clear. He says, you're asking me, like, don't ask me, because I follow Rabbi Yehuda. So whatever it is that I hold, B'negei Tosefes Truma, is only Rabbi Yehuda. You want to know Das Chachamim? I don't know. Because I don't go like the Chachamim. So what do we see from Rabbi Yechanan? That Rabbi Yehuda has a certain opinion regarding Tosefes Truma. The Chachamim don't agree with that. But he didn't say what Rabbi Yehuda holds Minigei Tosefes Truma. Don't forget, Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah only spoke about Minamukav. So now the Gemara says, what is, okay, so what, you're asking me, you understand what happened over Aviv? You ask Rav Shaila, what do you say to, are you chayiv in Maisris? So the Rav says, don't ask me, I know the answer, but my answer is only Rabbi Yehuda. I know that you don't follow Rabbi Yehuda. So I'm not going to answer for you. Okay, I want to know, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? So says the Gemara, what does Shitas Rabbi Yehuda? Is it l'chiyuv that you have to separate Meiser from the Tosefes that doesn't even have to be given min hamukav? Or is it at least Rabbi Yehuda liftoid? Now the benefit of knowing Shitas Rabbi Yehuda is because the Gemara is going to make the presumption that whatever Rabbi Yehuda holds, the Chachamim argue with. So which one is it? So the Gemara says that I can figure out, that we can deduce that in Teima l'chiyuv, if the pshat in Rabbi Yehuda, which Rabbi Yechanan Paskins like, is that Rabbi Yehuda who holds that it does not even need to be given min hamukov, automatically sublates in it. It has to be that you're chayiv in Maisris, then everything will make sense, as we'll explain in a moment. But if Rabbi Yehuda, then will be that added truma, that you don't even have to give min hamukov, is going to be potter. And Rabbi Yechanan is telling Reish Lakish, I follow Rabbi Yehuda, but you can't know l'chachamim. No, if Rabbi Yehuda will hold that you are exempt from Maisris, then Rabbi Yechanan could have told him that even I who hold Rabbi Yehuda, you're potter min Maisris, you, even if you're going to go like the chachamim, which that was his presumption, vadai potter min Maisris. So his answer wouldn't make sense to tell him, don't ask me because I follow Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda would be a raya to the chachamim. And it makes a lot of sense, which is Uma'i Rabbi Yehuda, the Islay Shalei Min Hamukov. Guys, the less similar this separation is to other separations, the less similar it is, the more logical it should be that you're chayiv in Maisris. Because if it's bana fi truma, then you should have had to separate it the way you separate truma. Rabbi Yehuda holds, not only can you measure it, the Chachamim already say that, but at least the Chachamim hold, you have to give it min hamukov. So at least the second separation is more similar to truma. Rabbi Yehuda allows this second separation to be the most dissimilar. Get these words. It's not like other truma. So if Rabbi Yehuda, who holds shalei min hamukov, it's the least similar to truma. If Rabbi Yehuda were to hold, according to Rabbi Yechanan, that still you are exempt from Maisres, the Chachamim who demand the second separation to be more similar to other Truma separations. The Leis Lohoin Shaloi Min Hamukev, yes, it has to be Min Hamukev. Yes, it has to be more similar to Truma. Vadai, this second separation should be more similar to Truma. That what? That it's going to be Pater Min HaMaisres. So therefore, even though Rabbi Yechanan, to people like us, would have communicated more clearly, but to the Chacham, to Reish Lakish, he gave him a beautiful answer. He told him, I paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Clearly, Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to be chayiv in Maisres. So Rabbi Yechanan is telling Reish Lakish, listen here, I don't know the answer to your question, because I only know for me. I go like Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to be chayiv in Maisres. But maybe, Chachamim, since the Chachamim hold it has to be min hamukev, it's more similar to Truma. So for that, don't ask me the question. Okay, now we got it. Now indeed, Amar Rabbi Yosi, in the name of Ravisi b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that Tosefes Truma chayev b'maisres. Gevaldik. So now we have clear. Rabbi Yechanan, paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds your patim in amaisres. Shimon ben Lakish, who doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Shimon ben Lakish will therefore hold. Now we're saying definitely that it is not. I'm sorry. Rabbi Yechanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's chayev b'maisres. And even Reb Shimon ben Lakish, that's it. And even Reb Shimon ben Lakish, just because Reb Shimon ben Lakish doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, he's saying, you're chayev b'maisres. In other words, it's not full-fledged truma. It's not full-fledged truma. It's truma, but it's not full-fledged truma. Amar Rabbi Yosi, how can you say that? I know he's saying the words Hamishna Amrakain. Hamishna Amrakain, what the Amoyre Rabbi Yosi means to say is that our Mishnah says the opposite. The Mishnah says the opposite. Can't say that. You're wrong. The Mishnah says that. Which Mishnah says the opposite? Again, they were chachamim. We have to know what they meant. So Amar Rab Ze'era le Rabbi Yisi. What was Rabbi Yisi looking at? V'loi agive. So Rabbi Yisi didn't answer. Why didn't Rabbi Yisi answer? He wanted Rab Ze'era to figure out on his own. Big thing in life, guys. We have to learn how to figure things out. So Amalei, maybe Dilma Hadod, our Mishnah. What steht in our Mishnah? The words of the Mishnah is Truma. V'yachser v'yitroim. V'yachser v'yitroim. What did we have in the ratio of the Mishnah? Eino tzarech litroim. Chazar v'hoisev chayiv v'maisros. That is what we had in the Mishnah, that one-liner. V'loi tana Allah chazar v'hoisev chayiv v'maisros. The Mishnah was not symmetrical here in the Sefer. The Mishnah did not say that from what you gave, you have to give maisres. The Mishnah in the Reisha says, Chazar v'hoisev chayiv v'maisres. Now I know that in the Reisha, that means that what you gave is bechlal not truma. Here the Mishnah is saying, truma v'yachser v'yitroim. Clearly the hashlama is truma. But still, just like the Reisha addressed maisres, if there would have been a chiyuv in maisres, the Sefer also would have addressed it. The fact that Rebbe omitted mentioning chayiv b'maisres is a raya that you're patim in a maisres. So we are rejecting the sheet of Reish Lakish. So now we have a machlekes hamayroim. Listen, Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish chayiv b'maisres. According to Rabbi Yosi, and the L'chu'ur Rab Ze'era and Abisi agreed with him that you're going to be patim in a maisres. It's amazing. At the chiyuv b'maisres, I understand. The p'tum in a maisres is amazing. Why is it amazing? Again, because biblically, when you separated the first separation, you were masakin it. That means that just the moment you remove the tevel of truma, now is chal the chiyuv of separating maiserishan. It's amazing.
So where the p'tur comes from?
Huh?
So where is the p'tur come from?
The p'tur comes from that's the koich of the chachamim. Once the chachamim say that there is this minimum amount, it's called tevel. And once it's called tevel, and now the tevel becomes truma, it's amazing. The Chachamim don't allow the status of tevel to be removed unless you hit the minimum amount. So instead of you looking at it as that it was rectified, but rabbinically it's not good. No, they're saying that the Chachamim held back its rectification.
So
Now
based on that,
very good, huh?
Based on that, would the initial truma separation not really be truma until the second truma was also separated?
That we don't say, because you are able to give truma piece by piece by piece. That was the beginning of the Pedic. I think it happened often, big farmers, that they had tremendous quantities, that even if they'll give the 2%, maybe 2% is a ton. They didn't have kalim for a ton. Not today, you have pitchforks, you have these big tractors. You remove till when you hit. Now, says the Gemara, Ad kama adam pointed tivre dvar Torah. We keep on saying, all of this is shura de rabbanan. What is the minimum needed midai raisa? Now we're going to have three opinions. Now listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. I just want to say that many amend, and they say, Daf Lamed Zayin, that it cannot be Rabbi Yochanan, because we have in the Bavli, in Avodah Zarah, Daf Ayin Gimel, Rabbi Yochanan was the one that says, Chita achas poiteres kol akri. And the kri, it can be a kri of 1,000,000 miles. So to have Rabbi Yochanan over here giving a shear doesn't fit. So just to know, so many say here it must be Rabbi Yonasan, and the next is Rabbi Yochanan, the opposite of the way we have it. But anyways, in our Gemara it's written, Rabbi Yochanan Amar.
Can he change his mind?
No, it would be very difficult to say that. It could be very difficult to say it. Okay. Echad lemeya ketrumas meiser. It's amazing. How much is trumas meiser? You think about it. When Hashem revealed his kavana by the Levi, The Levi gets 10%. From the 10%, he gives 10%. So from the Trumas Meiser, how much of it will go to the Kohen? 1%. Echad Lameya. So the Torah being Megala the Shiyurim by Meiser and Trumas Meiser, we make a hekesh that even though the Torah did not write a shir for Truma, it's Echad Lameya. Gavaldik. Now, again, if this was said by Rabbi Yonason, so now Amalei Rabbi Yochanan. But again, the way it's written over here is that the Echad Lameya is Rabbi Yochanan, so Amalei Rabbi Yonason. That Miman, Sham Isei, from where did you learn it? How did you get to that? Amalei mi pilpul chavraye shema Yisah.
Hold on, wasn't Rabbi Yonasan that a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan? Is it Yonasan ben Uzziel you were referring to?
Yeah, they're contemporaries.
Opa.
Chavedim. So it's amazing. In other words, is this a Masoida? No, it's not a Masoida. We figured it out on our own. The Chevra, it was a logic. However, Zakti Gemara, that Rabbi Yana Yamar, Afilu Echad Me Elef. Rabbi Mana, either Rabbi Mana is a third opinion, or Rabbi Mana is clarifying the Echad Me Elef, Leis Kan Shiyura. Not Echad Me Elef. Or Echad Me Elef doesn't mean it can't be Echad for the max, 1 from 1,000. No, there is no Shir. Fakert, because it says Reishis, the Goncha Tereshcha V'Yitzarech, as long as it is the Reishis. The Torah didn't say how much Reishis, the beginning is the beginning. How much is the beginning? Afilu kol shehu. Now, I want to tell you something. Afilu kol shehu l'chayra means you don't even need a chita achas. Who says you need a chita achas? What about a half a chita? It's late. I want to share the following. There's a certain theme that the Rebbe uses often. This is from the Torah of the Rebbe. I'm reading now out of Lekutei Sichos, Chelik Vavtes, Parshas Kisavei Beis, Amud 156, in a whole different context. There we're speaking about the Isur Hoitzah on Shabbos, and certain things, even though normally the Shir, like by Fudas Agregeres, certainly Yonim is Shir Kol Shehu. When Chazal say Kol Shehu, the Rebbe says there's two ways of understanding it. Omnan L'chudes, Do Achiluk B'neim, Vehegdem. As the Geder Isur Kol Shehu. By us, it's not an Isur. By us, it's a Heter Kol Shehu. The concept of Kol Shehu. Kemen Lernen of Tzvei Fanim. Aleph, number 1, as Das is a Shir, there is a Shir. What's the Shir? Kol Shehu. It's a measurement. What is the measurement? A kol shehu. Or is a isur, in our case, a heter, she'ein loy shir. Kol shehu doesn't mean it has to be something. Elamad, the something can be little. It means that there is no shir. Is the kol shehu a shir? Or is the kol shehu beyond shir? And this fits the words to back up the Rebbe's svara. Amar Rabbi Mana, leis kan shiyura. I'm curious if the Rebbe brings us over here in the Ha'aris, this Yerushalmi, this statement. In other words, whenever we learn about a kol shehu, the pshat of a kol shehu is not like chita achas peiteris, but like does it have to be a chita achas? What about a half a chita? That's a discussion. The words of leis kan shiyura means it can be a billionth of a chita. It has to be something, but there is no shear. It has to be something. It's beyond shear. Does it have to be something, or it means that there are no shiurim here, but you have to give. So give.
Like Chometz on Pesach.
Chometz on Pesach.
Like the people that won't use tap water because it's attached to the water reservoir that might have some bread in it.